Welcome to the Analog Gamers Podcast, a short podcast on board games and board gaming experiences. Here are your hosts.
I'm Shane.
And I'm Brent.
And I'm Frank.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. This week, after talking about social contracts and how you behave, the expectations of behavior when you meet with groups, we thought we would talk about something that underlies even that, and that is, what is your philosophy of gaming? Specifically, if you're not approaching games with the same goal in terms of enjoyment, where your pleasure comes from, then you're going to struggle with the group dynamics and the whole thing. Help me out here, guys.
So I know we've all talked about this a little bit before. I think everyone around the table would say their primary philosophy in gaming is to enjoy themselves. I don't think any of us are the kind that we want to play to win. Shane, sometimes some of the things you say underlie that might not be true for you.
Well,
but
I think you're right. The reason that we're all in the hobby is to enjoy ourselves, to have fun, to have new experiences, to be challenged. Part of that, I mean, we want to win games, but I mean that's a secondary goal. And that's almost a local goal, right? So it's like, in the moment while we're playing a game, yeah, we want to win, but that's not necessarily the goal of our hobby, is to win the most amount of board games that we can win. We play because we enjoy each other and we enjoy the games and being challenged and trying to come up with good strategies to win. So I think winning is a part of it, but it's not the reason any of us are in the hobby as a whole.
But that said, we all know people who that they derive their fun solely from winning. You're right. The three of us, when we're and the rest of the group that we have, their primary goal is to enjoy each other's company over a game and to be mentally challenged by working the mechanics of the game to win. But the challenge is the fun, not necessarily the winning. But we know people who, if they don't win, they're not having fun.
there's an entire competitive scene around games. So
That's right.
we know that it exists. It's certainly out there, and that's another philosophy of playing. We're not saying that's the wrong philosophy. We're just saying we don't always follow that.
No, what caught me was I think each one of us said the fun is in being together. But we have to acknowledge that for some people, the fun is in winning. It's not in being together. The competition is the fun.
But even so, I still think there's an important role of winning, or at least playing well, because I think we've all had strings where we just play horribly, like 5 games in a row, and it's just a bummer. Like, it's not fun to just keep getting crushed over and over and over again.
Last game day. That was me, because I came in last in all 3 games that we played, and the issue was that I didn't play well. What bothered me more than anything else was the game with Chicago Express, because I didn't even recognize that you were shortening the game.
Yeah,
and I was playing for a long game, and the fact that I missed that really upset me. Not that you did it; it made perfect sense strategically for you to play it the way you did. The entire disappointment was me being disappointed with myself because I didn't even recognize what was going on.
Well,
and that whole day was like that.
Yeah, and part of that was I didn't necessarily have the vision to play a long game, so I was like, how do we get out of this quick? Because the longer this game goes, the worse I'm gonna do. And I think I ended up. Did you
second.
Win that one, Brent?
He won. You
came
came in second.
Yeah. I recognized pretty quickly that I wasn't gonna grasp this game very well, and I needed to get out as quick as possible.
Okay, so mental note.
Any semblance of...
If you're playing with Shane and it's a new game, he may end it quickly just because he doesn't grok it yet.
But he grokked it enough to finish the game.
He did.
He got to an in condition that people weren't watching for. So,
and have enough money to come in second.
Mm-hmm.
You played well. It still drives me nuts that I missed it.
Yeah.
Of course, that was only my second game, so...
I think, too, when we think about philosophy of gaming, a lot of times we have kind of this overarching philosophy of, right, we're in the hobby for enjoying it, but I think, I don't know if we still call it a philosophy or goals, but I think our philosophy can also determine what games we're playing. Because if my goal is to laugh a lot in a game, right? I'm not going to play chess. If my goal is to really think a lot and get into strategy and really kind of get into those, right? Really kind of bending my mind and really stretching myself. Like Star Wars Rebellion is a great game to really get caught up in the minutia of strategy and thinking through all the components. But I'm not going to play Sushi Go if I want to, really, really think hard. So I think even our philosophy can change what types of games we're seeking to play.
Well, I know you've talked about it before, Frank, how as the group changed, you've changed your collection because we tend towards the heavier game. We tend
Right.
towards usually enjoying some of those games, and maybe that's some of our philosophy is that we like playing more complex, more involved games as a general rule.
So I think, well, first of all, that's very true. I originally had some heavy games. The gaming group was tending towards people who enjoyed more and more casual games, and I started steering my collection that direction. Then you guys joined, and I started steering it back because we do like the more complex games. So that is very definitely a piece to it. Often it comes about that people who like more complex games do tend to be more competitive. And I don't want to give our listeners the impression that we're not competitive. It's not that. It's just that the end goal isn't to win.
Yeah, we're still going to try to win. We don't, when we get to the end, as long as we played a good game, we don't necessarily care that we didn't win.
Right.
Now, like Frank said, if we didn't play a good game, that's a completely different story.
Frustrating.
Yes.
It can really irritate us, but
One of the things I like about Catan, actually, is I can lose, but if I know I was cornered and I had to really scratch out those 7 points I did get, I still feel good, even though I lost, because it's very visual what I did and how difficult it was, given the circumstances, to get even that far.
Yeah, I think it's pretty rare that I've played a game of Catan that's not at least somewhat competitive in the early to mid stages.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons I think that game is balanced really well is it's pretty even throughout the game. I've played some online Catan and sometimes you just crush people, they get like 2 points. But I don't know, maybe that's like a 6-year-old playing.
I don't know.
Or
Which,
Jenna.
by the way, if you've never laughed playing chess, it's because you haven't played grade school kids. They will make you laugh playing chess.
Yeah, no, I don't play many grade school kids in many games. So I think something that we need to consider too is we kind of have active philosophies of gaming, right? So we actively seek to play. We look for games that we know we're going to enjoy for a group that we want to be a part of. But I think there's some passive philosophy of gaming too so for example, I was talking with my mother-in-law this weekend and she was saying how when she grew up, the belief was games were for kids. And that's very much a philosophy of gaming that games are for kids or games are for nerds or we only play party games. Like that in itself is a philosophy of gaming of maybe philosophy of not gaming. Do you guys think there are any other of those kind of not necessarily win versus have fun, but kind of those passive attitudes towards games or feelings towards games?
So you just took this in an entirely new direction for 8:30 in the morning.
Yeah, we're recording early today.
we haven't even got to 8:30.
So at any rate, yes. That's my short answer.
Great. Good discussion.
I guess I never would have thought of that as a philosophy of gaming, and I do think you're right.
So even if I think about my own mom and, she loves playing games, but every time I come home, if I bring one of my board games, she's like, did you bring one of those stupid games? I hate your games. Right. So her philosophy of gaming is games are meant to make you laugh, to be lighthearted, and to include everybody in the room, no matter how many people there are. So she very much has a philosophy of gaming of games are meant to be very lighthearted. She loves the game Headbands, which you hate.
Yes.
She loves all those kind of word association games. I got her to play Codenames last time I was home, and she actually really liked that. But that's very much a word association type
It is.
game.
It just has more defined rules.
Yeah. So for her philosophy of gaming is games are meant to be very lighthearted, very much party games, include everybody, accessible from 6 years old to, 107.
This is exactly the thing that makes me hesitate. Every time I hear somebody say, come to our game night, because I'm like, okay, what is it? I'm like, oh, we play Trivial Pursuit and we play Pictionary and we play, and I'm like, oh,
No, I'm
okay.
busy.
But I don't want to be antisocial, so how do I work this out? And that very much, you're right. That is very definitely a philosophy of gaming thing. What is it that you're seeking from the games, and what makes a quote unquote good game to you?
So do you feel like that's changing though now? Because I do feel like that was very prevalent for several generations. Those are the kind of games that most people play.
Yeah, I think it has, not only is it changing, but the pace of change is picking up. And the reason I say that is because so I really got back into gaming in 2008, 10 years ago. And when I started doing it, no one knew Catan, no one knew Ticket to Ride. I had barely heard of Ticket to Ride. Daniel just gotten it for Christmas, the previous Christmas. And so all of these games, it was opening my eyes back up to what gaming had become, because I thought it was mass market games and war games. That's all I knew, and chess and everything else. But this whole other hobby genre I didn't know. And at first, probably for the first easily 5, probably closer to 7 years, I didn't really talk to people about playing games, because I got that reaction of games are for kids, or games are for people who don't take life seriously, or games are for people who can't handle life. And then within the past few years, I have stopped worrying about that more because people have started to realize, okay, games are, well, first of all, you'll find Catan and Ticket to Ride and Blockus and a couple others right in the mass market stores, and people know them, and they've started to respect them. And tying back to another philosophy, people are starting to realize that they're great for family time. You look at Hasbro, they've had this whole family night thing. Unfortunately, they're marketing entirely the wrong games for family night, but
Well, and as you were speaking, I was even thinking that it would have been interesting during that period, to get a photo once a month of Target's board game shelf and just watch it change and grow in the different types of games that are on their shelves. Because, you're right. When I was a kid, it was like Monopoly, Sorry, and a cheap chess set. And now you go and they've got, a whole aisle of board games and all different kinds of stuff.
Well, and I know at work, I have coworkers I never would have thought they're just not the type you would expect to play games, but they're talking about going to the board gaming cafes and playing at those things and enjoying some of this.
Yeah.
They start to not like the cafes and the public experience, but that's a different problem. But they're enjoying the games at least.
Definitely. And I almost wonder if that games are for children perspective is because pretty much most available games back in the day were for kids. There wasn't a lot of open market. I mean, you had to be in the hobby and go to game stores to find these more hobby type games rather than, all those games that are marketed for kids.
So that's probably part of it. Part of it is probably the fact that the newer design concepts originated overseas. Part of it is, at least has nothing to do with games per se, but my parents were Depression parents. They grew up in the Depression, and so it was a hard scrabble life, and there was no time for leisure.
Yeah.
So leisure activities were for people who didn't take life seriously. That's overly harsh, but my point being that I think to some extent, leisure activity, everything about your life even was productive. Even your hobbies were productive in previous generations. If you had a hobby, it wasn't a respectable hobby unless it was woodworking or something that actually produced something, unless it was maybe golf. But even there, how much of golf was used as an extension of the office? Right. And so to some extent, now we could get into a whole discussion that would be away from gaming on that kind of thing. But I do think that all of that has an influence, and not only what games were available, but also where the previous generations have come from. They didn't have as much leisure time as we do now, I don't think.
Yeah. So you're saying that a podcast isn't a great product produced by gaming, or at least it wouldn't have been for Depression era.
Well, I don't know that you could. I mean, we are now in the information age. I don't think that was even been even a concept.
Radio talk show
A
still
radio
would have
show.
been. So
Yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
no, that's true.
a radio talk show about board gaming, maybe not, but
All right, guys. So what happens?
But Car Talk's been on the radio for how many
That's
years? How many car shows have been on the radio for years?
So what happens when you sit down at a table and everybody at the table has a different philosophy of gaming, and you put Catan in the middle of the table and you play?
Well, first of all, strap on your seatbelt because it could be a rocky ride.
Why?
The hard part is that in my experience, you guys tell me if you've had different experiences, but the person who wants to win, I'm answering this because you looked at me when you asked the question. The person who is driven by winning may be easily frustrated by somebody who makes a suboptimal move or a more casual move because they're just not thinking as hard because that's not where it's at for them. And the person who is playing more casual.
Even more frustrated by the person who makes a suboptimal move and knows they're making a suboptimal move.
Yes.
I think that's probably even worse than the person that's just ignorant.
Right. As opposed to the person who is playing more casually being frustrated by the person who is bloodthirsty.
Or seems like a suboptimal move. So, like, when we were playing Acquire, I was very much playing for third place, and I knew I was playing for third place. So I wasn't necessarily making the best decisions to win the game, but I was making the best decisions to play third place, to get to third place. And, there were people around the table that were like, what are you doing?
Well, I was the one who questioned it the most.
Yeah.
And my concern there was not that, I don't think that was a difference of philosophies. My concern there was that you were not understanding the game.
Right.
That somehow there was something about this game that you were missing. And that concerned me as the teacher /
Oh, I understood. I just knew I was nowhere close to.
No, that's
those
fine.
settings.
so
But yeah, so differences.
I think the difference, if you sit down with a group of people around a game, especially one that one person's teaching and the rest don't know, Catan not a great example because a lot of people know it now.
Yeah.
But you also have a difference in how that teaching style would be from what other people expect.
Wow.
If you're going towards a philosophy of I want to play and I want to win and I want to beat everybody into the ground, you're not going to help them.
Yeah, you should not be teaching a game if that's your philosophy.
Or maybe you should, because you're probably going to beat them.
Yeah. You will teach them through suffering. Because I've been taught a game once or twice by people that just annihilate everybody else at the table. And I'm like, what was the point of teaching us this game just to beat the crap out of us?
That brought me to another area potentially of this philosophy, and is what about taking turns back and that kind of stuff, right? A person who is ultimately driven by let's do what's fair for everybody, even if they are playing to win, might say it's not even a quality win for me though if I don't bring everybody up as far as I can strategically when I teach them this game.
Yeah.
As opposed to somebody who doesn't really care about that. They just have to have the W. And they don't really care about that. And I've seen people go both ways on take back turns. So I'm going to use that as an example. I'm going to use that as an example. There are people who say, okay, clearly we're going to take this back because you made a suboptimal move. And I'm pretty sure it's because you missed a strategic point. So let's back that up and ask you, Brent, did you really want to make that move given that maybe you're missing this consequence? And you might say, no, I saw that. Yeah, this is what I want to do. You might say, wow, you're right. I didn't see that. Let's change it. And I've seen different philosophies where somebody says, no. They screwed up. That's their problem. And and I'm driving to win. And I've also seen people that say the win doesn't even count. I'm not even interested in winning if it's not a game where I've been challenged by the other players. And maybe part of that's the philosophy of, are you playing against the game or are you playing against the players? I don't know. This just popped into my brain, so it's not even a half-baked thought.
Well, and I know we'll talk about teaching games later in the season, but I think teaching definitely presents its own philosophy. And a lot of times when I teach games, I win, but a lot of those games are close because I do believe in lifting the other players up, helping them with strategy, at least the first time we play, or until they get it. But, it does... When I think about teaching games and giving players an opportunity to take back moves, if it's a game we're all experienced about, you should have known better. I ain't taking the time to redo your whole turn.
Right.
But for me, I guess it depends on the game. If their turn took 5 minutes, I don't really want to relive that all over again. But if it's a matter of,
Another 5 minutes.
wait,
Come
I
on.
should have placed these two people here instead of there. Can I just move them over here? Yeah, for me, that's pretty easy, just to let them do that. So,
Yeah.
so for the most part, if it's a quick redo, I don't mind. Even in experience games, if we put a piece down and then we go, oh, wait a minute, I wanted it here instead, I rarely have an issue with that type of thing.
Right. Although I do think, and part of it is, I think there's this underlying philosophy / social contract that amongst us, the three of us, and a few other people we play with, that when your finger leaves the board, your move's done. You've committed. So if you screwed up, that's on you, unless it violates a rule. Unless what you did was technically not possible according to the rules. Okay, then we got to fix it because we can't do that.
Unless you're Dracula, because then we really want you to screw up.
Yeah, we'll pretty much let anything go.
Well, of
In
course,
Hunter's favor.
Dracula is one of the Fury of Dracula. I don't know about 3rd edition, but 2nd edition is one of those games that has actually something in there about breaking the rules and what the penalties are for breaking the rules, even inadvertently.
So I think this is another philosophy too. What happens when players do break the rules and you don't figure it out until 4 turns later? And how does that kind of shade your experience of the game? I would think if you're just in it to win it, if it was a illegal move that's really hurting you, I feel like that would be pretty upsetting. I feel like for most of us, we're like, well, we got to make a note and remember next time not to do that. I mean, I know we've played games where we get half the rules wrong. And next time we're like, this is a new game because we've never played these rules before.
Yes, we have. So, which gets to another a related philosophy thing, and that is, what's your philosophy when you are in the middle of the game and all of a sudden you realize, oh, we don't know what the rules say about this particular situation. Do you stop the game, look up the rules, or do you make something up that sounds like it's probably right and move on and then fix it afterwards? And it's not so much that one is right or what is wrong, but there better be, and that's true of all these philosophies, right? It's not so much that there's a right way or a wrong way to approach this. It's that everybody at the table has to be approaching things at the same way, or else there's some kind of discord there.
So I think I'm going to take from this, the best gaming experiences are when you play with people who have a very similar social contract and philosophy of gaming as yourself.
And I think a big difference between social contract and philosophy of gaming is social contract can change and you kind of have to give and take when it comes to that. But it's really hard to change your philosophy of gaming because it's about you and what your desires are and what your goals are within the hobby. And so it can be really difficult if you're a super casual player to play, in a competitive group because it's just not what you like. It's not your preference.
Yes.
I mean, you can change okay, I can't keep my coffee cup on the table while we play, or
I can no longer eat Cheetos as we play
yeah,
games.
those things are pretty easy to change and go back and forth on. You just need to know them. But your philosophy it's fairly set. And not to say that we all don't enjoy competitive, tough games, because we do. But if we came to the table every time we get together and just played Cutthroat, I don't think any of us would really enjoy it or keep doing it.
No, I don't think we would either. And I think to your point, I think you're absolutely right. Social contracts are about how you do things. The philosophy is about why you do things. And that's really, I think, ultimately, you can come back to the social contract and say, okay, I need to change my behavior to fit in with a group. But ultimately, if your philosophy is different, it's probably time to move on to another group or form your own.
And it shapes your experiences too. I really enjoy chess, but in a super casual format. Like Jen and I will play on the kitchen table. I would never go to a competition and play. Now, it's not to say I couldn't or I don't have the skill level or the knowledge to. That's just not my goals. That's not what I enjoy. So I think your philosophy even shapes where you're playing, who you're playing against, and your experience of playing those games.
I have a friend of mine that's one of the other scout leaders in our troop. He and I play Hive a lot of times when we're camping. That's one kind of tradition he and I will get in at least one game of Hive. And I have threatened to play that because he can take a little bit of time. Actually, both of us can, to be fair, to play it with a chess clock. And he's like, no, we won't do it that way. And I only threatened to do it to mess with him because he gets that reaction. And the reason is because it would completely change the nature of the game. And he would, I don't even know that I would enjoy it with a chess clock because that time pressure kind of now we're really serious kind of thing, I think would actually detract from the experience for us. But it's fun to mess with it.
Man, thinking about that, I do get super anxious when games have timers.
Right.
Even when they're necessary, it still makes me really anxious.
Or when you might not get something because someone else outbids you.
Ooh! So we've been playing quite a few games where. So an example is Go Nuts for Donuts that we played, and you have to secretly select which donut you want to take. And if other players select the same one, you don't get it. Man, I get so anxious during games like that where I don't know if I'm gonna get what I'm trying to get. I get very anxious.
Which is really funny because that game is like super light, 15 minutes long, and yet it can spin you up.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Which is why I think that's where it's most entertaining for us is when watching Shane.
Well, and then what was that other Broom Service? Broom Service. That one's the same way.
Although that one's a longer game, so I get that one a little bit.
Right, but even I mean that mechanic of like if you pick the same thing somebody else does, you may not get it. Makes me, I don't know why. Not like serious having a breakdown anxious, but just like it gets my adrenaline pumping and I get nervous.
In a good way or bad way? That's the question.
Depends on if I'm winning or not, I guess.
Okay, and on that note,
usually in an okay way, and I mean if I end up playing well, good. If I end up playing poorly, bad.
Yeah.
Because sometimes in those games you just get screwed every single time, and I'm like, I don't want to enjoy this. But if I'm getting a few here and there, I'm usually pretty content.
All right, so we've talked about our philosophies. This is kind of concluding where we started with our social contracts and some of the background stuff about why we play and what we do. Thanks for listening. You now know what we think and what other people kind of think sometimes. Just keep it in mind when you go to play with a group, one you've played with or one you haven't played with, that everyone has their own philosophy and probably some kind of social contract going on at the table that you need to be aware of. Thanks for listening.
This has been the Analog Gamers Podcast. Thanks for listening. Please spread the word about our podcast, which can be found at theanaloggamers.libsyn.com. You can email us at theanaloggamers@gmail.com or find us on Facebook as The Analog Gamers. Our intro and outro are recorded by Daniel Feldman. Logo artwork provided by Tabitha Jordan Nichols. The Analog Gamers Podcast is licensed under Attribution, No Commercial, Non-Derivative, Creative Commons 4.0 license.